This entry presents a fundraising model for use in the world's rich countries. Its purpose is to provide rich governments with the public funds needed to meet their official development assistance targets. Since 1970, the world's rich countries have committed to spending 0.7% of national income on international development assistance. And if you look at the relative quality of life enjoyed by citizens in these countries, 0.7% of income seems like the least that might be done. In these rich countries of ours, we have it pretty damn well. And yes, it's really only by grace of circumstances that we've avoided a life of scrounging for scrap metal or whatever. Unfortunately, for most of us, our political representatives don't seem to care about national commitments to international development assistance. There are just more politically expedient things for them to toss money at. In Canada, according to my own back-of-the-napkin calculations, there's a shortfall in ODA equivalent to around $250 per Canadian citizen, or around $9 billion. Given the speed with which I've arrived at this calculation, though, it could be way off, but I think it's right. I have a feeling that this money could be raised through a new sort of national fundraising campaign, and truly it would be a national project aimed at redeeming the nation's moral standing. In effect, the campaign would compile a list of every individual and business in the country, and until they'd made their required donation, their names would remain on that list. Social media would be central to this undertaking. Consider Facebook, for instance. Donations could be linked to a Facebook profile. When you'd made your required personal, say, $250 donation, your friends would no longer see you on a list of those who'd shirked their moral responsibility. And yes, I suppose once you'd made a donation, your name could be added to a list showing that you'd actually made it. A list of businesses with Canadian operations would definitely need to be compiled. These businesses would then be added to a list of non-contributors, and their names would be removed only once a contribution had been made. In the case of businesses, I think it would make sense that the value of their contributions would be shown, and then it would be up to the public to decide if their contributions were up to snuff. Some friends we also know have it way better than others, and in these cases we might expect them to meet their own donor target, and then some. Accordingly, the site might show whom among our friends had made exceptional donation. If given a sufficient window of time, I don't think that anyone could excuse themselves from this obligation. With very few exceptions, if you're living in a rich country, you have it really well. Individuals and businesses could be given the option of specifying what particular development goals they'd like their donations to be made to. Maybe childhood literacy, or clean drinking water, or measles inoculation, or leprosy prevention, or whatever. They might also be given the option of choosing where in the world they'd like their donations to be spent. Governments, I suspect, would want to get involved. They might, for instance, commit to matching funds or something of the sort, and in that case, the onus on individuals could be reduced significantly. I'm speaking of a one-off campaign, and I say this because I think it would be very difficult to pull this sort of public undertaking off a second time. People just get bored in this day and age. Having said that, I think that if the funds were actually raised, then governments would have the sort of political input needed to maintain this commitment in subsequent years using public tax dollars. If, as individuals, the public could collectively make up for the shortfall in ODA, or in other words, voluntarily pay higher taxes in the name of meeting their national commitments to impoverished souls around the world, then I think that governments would feel a certain obligation to maintain this commitment going forward. Anyway, the concept is one of name and, as necessary, shame. It's easy to pay lip service to helping the world's poor, and it's equally easy to shirk one's responsibility to them, and the record shows it.